Hello, my crafty friends. It's Marie from Marie's Vermont Creations, and we're going to make this heat embossed Mother's Day card today. We're using the Beautiful Flowers stamp set, that large floral arrangement from there. We're going to heat emboss on the front of this card. I'm using a white cardstock, which is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I have this mounted on my stamping platform. I do have a small glue dot in the center, which is I'm gonna use to try to help me hold this cardstock in the center of my platform, since the image goes off of the paper some. So I'm using an anti-static powder tool, and this will help to keep the embossing powder from going into places that I don't want it to, in case there's oil from my fingers. We're going to use Versamark ink to ink up this stamp all over. Versamark is a sticky ink, so it helps the embossing powder to adhere to it. So you want to take and make sure that you press this down really well to get a good impression. You are using a stamp platform, so you could stamp it more than once, but because I took my time and was able to really press this down, I only needed to stamp it once. So that's what I'm doing right now, just working my hand over it. Some people find that if you take the sleeve of your shirt over your hand and give it a press, that will give you a good impression as well. Unfortunately, I didn't have any sleeves, so I wasn't doing that. So I am going to take this off the platform, and I am going to sprinkle some Recollections detailed white embossing powder all over my stamped image into a coffee filter, so that I can put it all back into the container when I am done. I do make a little bit of a mess here, but I'm able to just dust it off from my platform since I spill it a little bit. But you want to make sure that you've got the image completely coated, and that you don't have embossing powder where you don't want it. If for some reason you did get some embossing powder that stuck somewhere you didn't want it, you just take a dry paintbrush and you can brush that off before you heat emboss. So I'm just putting this back in the container because I am clumsy and I will knock that over, or spill it, sneeze on it, who knows, but I will make a mess. So I'm just going to wipe it off my platform, get that out of the way, heat up my heat tool so that it's good and hot, so that the image melts. The embossing powder will melt quickly, so that it doesn't warp the paper that I'm using. So if you have it good and hot, that helps with that. And so the way that you can tell if your embossing powder is ready is it's a powder before you heat it up, and then it melts, so then it gets glossy. So if you tilt it and turn it in the light, you'll be able to see if you have all of your embossing powder melted. And throughout this process, I did have a few areas that I did not melt all the way, so I had to go back in and make sure that I did get them. But if you want to move your heat tool around, don't hold it in one spot, because it could potentially burn your paper if it gets too hot, and you don't want to do that because that would ruin your project. So I'm just going to finish heating this up, making sure that I've melted all of the areas. I am using the tweezers to hold the papers, because it is far to the left of the image. The image is to the far left of the paper, so if I hung onto it by that side, I could potentially burn my fingers if I'm not careful. So the tweezers help with that. So I'm checking to make sure that I have it melted, and there were a few spots that needed to have a little more heat, like I said. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then you want to let your image cool, because if you touch it while it is still hot, the embossing powder will melt. So I did let this cool, but I'm just taking a dry Kleenex to wipe off the embossing powder bag remnants. And this is the Mother's Clematis stamp set, and we're going to use that for our sentiment. And when I had originally done this, I had done it on some black cardstock with heat embossing in white, but I don't know, it stood out too much. I didn't enjoy it, so I took that off, started over, and I am using some vellum for this one. So I will again use the embossing bag to try to reduce having embossing powder where I don't want it. And then I will ink up the stamp in Versamark ink and coat it with the Recollections detailed white embossing powder. So when you are doing vellum, it's very important to make sure that it's warm enough, because vellum is very easy to warp or crinkle up if you have too much heat on it. So again, making sure your heat tool is good and hot, and then just melt that until it's all smooth, and you'll be good to go. So what I'm going to do is adhere this to the back of my card so that you can't see any adhesive, because the thing with vellum is if you were to just stick some glue on the back of it in just a few spots, you would be able to see that. So if that bothers you, you either can adhere it to the back of your project, or if you were to heat it up, or not heat it up, I'm heating it up now, but if you were to apply adhesive to the entire piece, it's less noticeable. So if you ran it through like a Xyron sticker maker, or just put your adhesive all over the back of it, then you're not as likely to see the adhesive. If it doesn't bother you, then it's not a problem. You carry on, you do it however you want. But that I am going to do it to the back of the project today. So that's what I'm going to get ready to do, is adhere that to the back of the card, just using some, dry adhesive. I am again using tweezers though to help me to not burn my fingers. And once you've used your heat tool once, it stays warm for a while, so it does go, does go quicker for the next thing that you do. So usually it's the first time around that you need to make sure you've you're good and hot. I did wipe off the excess powder from the powder bag again, because it will stick to your project. But again, make sure that it's cool or you will smear your sentiment. So when I first put this sentiment on, I put it on rather crooked. So I am going to adhere one side and then adhere the other one pointing towards the sky for some reason. So I will pull that off and fix it, because there it is, heading up crooked. So thankfully it is to the back of the project, so I don't rip anything from the front, and then line it back up to make sure that it's straight. And then I will adhere that back to the back of the project. And then I have this mom die that I received in one of the card kits a while back. It's very delicate. I have tried every way to adhere it to this particular card, and I've had a heck of a time. I tried doing 3 layers. I tried putting it on double-sided adhesive on my paper first, and then adhering them together, which you could kind of see I've been working on there. What I ended up doing is that piece of paper there is my scrap paper, because I tend to put too much glue on. What I need to invest in is a fine tip applicator for my glue, but I don't have one yet. So I'm putting the glue on, and what I'm going to do is put the mom sentiment, the die cut, down on the piece of scrap paper so that I can smush out any excess glue on that piece of paper before I put it on my project. I do struggle to pick it back up and put it down on the card, but it is, like I said, a very delicate die cut. But once I get it adhered down, I am going to put some of my acrylic blocks on it so that it helps adhere, especially since I am putting it on that raised embossing section of the card. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to put that down there. It doesn't take too long for it to adhere. And that is the card project for today. It is, I am going to make these for the nursing home, so they're going to just say Happy Mother's Day, but I need to make 55 of them for the upcoming Mother's Day holiday. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you have a great day.